Half the year is quickly zipping past us, weirdly enough, as the calendar damn near hits June. We're through spring football. We wanted to kind of look back at some of it. This is Louisiana versus All Y'all's Recruit That Boot. I'm Jet Roser. He's Sam Spiegelman, and this is going to be one of those loosely organized, just kind of chatting back and forth about some of our thoughts coming out of spring football around Louisiana episodes. So I'm sure that's going to go great and, have no issues with choppiness or low moments at all. But Sam, I'm looking forward to it for sure. It was fun to hit the road a bunch this spring and see a lot of different teams, a lot of coaches, a lot of kids, a lot of parents of kids that I hadn't had a chance to see in a while. And so it was definitely a fun time. Looking forward to chopping it up a little bit about it. How are things going for you as we get real close to this college camp time of year?
Yeah. Well, we've been looking forward to this episode for a few weeks now. Especially you have had a spring for the ages, so it's going to be fun to break it down and reflect. And Jared, I don't need to tell you, you can't move forward until you look backwards, right? You can't see where you're going until you see where you've been. So I'm excited to break this down with you. I have not had the spring. In fact, I've had 2 springs in a row that have been not up to the Sam standard. So again, thank you to all the therapists out there that are keeping me afloat. I'll also have a very small camp season this year between Future 50 and the Rivals 5-star, and that'll be it. I am on house lockdown against my will. Send help, but I appreciate you being out in the world so we have something to break down on Recruit That Boot.
Takes a team of professionals to keep you rolling at full capacity, huh?
At least.
All right, so we'll get into, really the 6 spring games in particular that I had a chance to get to, as well as just some kind of overall thoughts. I went into spring really hoping that between knowing I was going to take a couple days and go hit track state championships, knowing that weather is always kind of a circus in and of itself, I was hoping I could find a way to see 20 schools, and I ended up seeing 25, including 6 spring scrimmages. And so that ended up working out pretty well. But before we dive into some of that, there has been, and it's a guy we'll probably talk a little bit about again later on in this episode, the news element, the new developing story is a guy we talked about a couple of weeks ago with his own Isaiah Washington tribute episode. LSU makes its move late last week and does join his rapidly expanding offer list. Didn't need to see him come to camp necessarily before making that move, which I thought was a pretty notable component of all of this. And Isaiah just continues to have the May of his young life right now from a recruiting standpoint. And I think at this point, neither one of us was necessarily all that surprised knowing that Jake Olson had made his trip all the way up to Haynesville and had a chance to see Isaiah and whatnot. But I'm super excited for him, and he's someone that LSU fans should be super excited to watch his recruitment continue to develop, because I think if I was putting money on the situation, I'm probably betting on purple and gold at the next level for Isaiah as early as it is to kind of make that call.
Well, we've talked about the timing of LSU's offers being just a little bit different in this new NIL era. So to see him offer in May before I imagine he will schedule his June official visit, I'd circle the 20th being their biggest official visit weekend in the Bayou.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it's not going to start to get really interesting this weekend. But we talked about it. LSU has missed on 2 of their top targets in state in the secondary. Blaine Bradford is locked in with Ohio State. And Hayward Howard, obviously an interesting situation, but he's committed to Texas right now. So LSU is playing from behind. Love Jake Olson and Corey Raymond, who are going to evaluate a ton of different DBs over the next month. In-state guys like Isaiah, like Desi from Franklin Parish. And then also Corey Raymond and Jake Olson are bringing a ton of talent from places like Alabama and Mississippi and Florida and Georgia. And beginning this weekend, we're going to see how this secondary looks for this 2026 class. And like you said, I would not be surprised to see Isaiah in there. But I think with Blaine and Hayward currently not in the class, they're not going to wait to fill up these spots. And I'm excited to see who they get.
We'll keep an eye on how this next month develops for LSU. It should be a relatively fast and furious process in a lot of ways, with a lot of guys that are going to be on campus, a lot of out-of-state guys, it seems like this weekend, high-profile prospects making their way to Baton Rouge, and all the way kind of culminating in that weekend of the 20th. That should be the huge weekend of Friday Night Lights, and just some of the biggest names from around the country and around the state making their way to campus for that one. But we'll get to that when it's time to get to more of that. As far as the spring football look, the spring scrimmage slate for me started with a bang. We hit on it some last week, just, with a couple of notable guys out there. But my first scrimmage was the mecca of Louisiana high school spring games, and Edna Carr versus Destrehan. And for me, it's two teams that look like certain contenders in their respective Division I brackets. I don't think I need to tell you. It seems like it was a surprise to some people, but Carr looks like a full-blown college team where they graduated some great guys from that 25 class. And it seems like everywhere they did, pretty much they have their answer ready to go. You're seeing guys right now picking up offers from all over the country, including some Power 4 offers, some SEC offers for guys that were kind of bench role player type guys last year, or were sitting out last year, waiting to be eligible this year, and are just ready to kind of plug and play. And so I know as you kind of look forward to this fall, that's got to be exciting to hear from what you should expect to see from the Cougars. But I think Destrehan, despite having to deal with all that in the spring game, you saw some things from them that make me feel like they're one of the top 2 or 3 teams to watch on the non-select side. I don't know if you have any early thoughts on those two teams, or questions from that matchup, or anything along those lines.
Yeah, I think we say this about Carr every year. They don't rebuild, they reload. And what you're talking about, a state championship nucleus coming back of Big Rich and Aiden and Hayward on the defensive side of the ball. They have always have some of the most soundest, most well coached linebackers in the state year after year. It's kind of the heart of that defense, playing beside Big Rich and Big Aiden. But really, John Johnson coming back on offense. Yeah, you lose, freakazoids like Manchild and the kid that went to Tulane. It's Carr. They have weapons. They have Greg Wilford has transferred in. He's going to add some juice to that offense. But really, it starts and it ends with that offensive line, which has a ton of returning faces. They're very stout up front to give John time back there to throw and also create with his legs. And speaking of legs, you've seen this over the last couple of years, is the emphasis on this running game in Algiers. The running game has been the basis for this offense. They love to take big shots, and they love to let John make off-schedule throws and improvise, and he's a heck of an athlete when it comes to that. But they start and end with running the football, and now they have multiple backs back there that have power, that have speed. I have almost no doubts as of May 28th that we'll see Carr in New Orleans in December. I'm ready to book my flight now. As far as Destrehan goes, I think I've said this for the last 5 or so years. I think Marcus Scott is one of the best coaches in the state of Louisiana. And since he returned to Louisiana when he went back to Errett, before getting to Destrehan, we saw Errett make some of its best runs toward a state championship that they've had in the past decade. And that includes those famous teams with Mike Divinity and Scooter Harris and whatnot. Marcus Scott and these Destrehan Wildcats, I think we saw the biggest takeaway from the spring was the emergence of Chandler at quarterback. Jackson Fields.
You're mixing fields. You're missing QB fields.
I'm mixing field. My fields are all over here. Fields. But Jackson Fields, reestablishing what he can do under center is the lifeblood of this offense. You have one of the best receivers, not only in the state, but in the country, in Jabari Mack, who last year was a spark plug, not playing receiver, but playing quarterback, getting handoffs. I think he is due for a sensational senior season. They have talent around him. You talk about a running game. Destrehan's going to have that. They're going to have a stout defense. And they're a team that sometimes doesn't start the year off as hot as they should, but they tend to be playing their best football as the weather gets a little bit cool when district play starts. I think Destrehan, as always, with this kind of talent, is in store to make a little bit of a run this year as well.
I think the Carr side, John looked quick as ever out there, taking off and running. And I think that dynamic with him and those two backs you mentioned, who I think Trey Garrison and Jamon Macklin are going to bring some degree of a thunder and lightning. Trey's a little bit of a thicker athlete. I mean, they're both tough and they both have some speed to him. Jamon seems like he's got a little bit more wiggle to him, but that running game with those three guys all working together in the backfield is going to be a lot of fun to watch. I'm interested to see how the receiving core looks by the time we get to fall, in a lot of different ways. And then the defensive side is just loaded as can be once again, and a name to watch for fans out there. A new name, Joel Baptiste, is a dynamite edge rusher that we didn't get a chance to watch last fall, other than seeing him in some workout situations and warm-ups and whatnot, and looked the part, and he was playing the part in his kind of dress rehearsal this spring to wrap up spring ball for the Cougars. On the Destrehan side, that's a team that I think folks started to kind of overlook at points last year when Jackson was hurt, and then when he was, were right back in the thick of things as a deep playoff run team and potential contender down the stretch. And so for him to be back healthy, getting ready for his senior year, and some of the connections he has with those guys around him, including Jabari, who I thought looked excellent in the spring game, setting DBs up and making big plays down the field. You and I have talked so many times about, we call him Jay Sizzle. Jabari, his limit is the sky. I mean, the ceiling for his potential is so sky high. All you want to see from him is just to continue to be more consistent, more assertive, be that guy every time out that we have known since he was, in middle school, that he had the potential to be. And so watching him continue to kind of take those steps in that direction is really exciting. And I'm looking forward to seeing what happens for both those teams this fall. They'll definitely be two of the top 5A teams I'm watching. Also, note on that Fields mix-up, I knew that Chandler had a younger brother coming up through the ranks when these guys, Jackson and Hudson, were youngsters coming through, I guess, middle school age. And I wrote at some point about Jackson, younger brother of Louisiana Cajuns quarterback Chandler Fields, and Jackson had to hit me up pretty swiftly and correct me. Hey, no, that's Hudson. He's a brother Martin. I'm Jackson. We're not related. Keep an eye on both of us for the years to come. And so we got that corrected about 4 years ago. But definitely am sensitive to that a little bit. I went from that matchup to last Thursday. Had a chance to see JFK and Holy Cross over at Pan Am, two teams that I think, I wrote this weekend over on Bengal Tiger as I just kind of wrapped up some final spring notes. The thing that stood out to me about both of those squads was some of their pressure they were able to get on the opposing quarterbacks. Sebastian Perez, a big under-the-radar defensive end for Holy Cross, was in the backfield quite a bit. Grayson Powell, a 2027 guy for JFK that's kind of been on our radar a little bit from a recruiting standpoint throughout his high school career thus far, was among those guys spearheading some of the pressure for the Cougars. But that's two teams that, obviously we love those two coaches and Coach Watney and Coach Elfage, and looking forward to seeing what those guys can do this spring. This fall. Don't have nearly as many takeaways for those two as Carr and Destrehan, but I think both are certainly hoping to build and kind of take a next step back forward this year. JFK dealt with some drama and having to forfeit games early in the season, and ended up kind of playing behind the eight ball somewhat seating wise. And I think they'll be a really interesting team to watch this year in D2 as they get back to it pretty hungry once again. And then for Holy Cross, they've got a quarterback who I think we've both seen through the years as well, Jacoby Faria, who has been at St. Aug, was backing up the two-headed monster at quarterback at Aug a couple years ago, and has bounced around a little bit. And now he gets his shot, and he's someone that I know they're really excited about helming that offense for the Tigers.
Yeah, I think I think you hit it on the head. I think these are two programs in the New Orleans area that are both with the arrow pointing up. Are they at the same level as a Carr or a Destrehan that we were just talking about? Not yet, but they're certainly on their way. JFK met with Shaw, the eventual state champion, en route to the Dome last year. Obviously, Shaw has its sights set on repeating. Don't even make us get Hank Tierney on this podcast this summer, because that will be too fun to handle. But I know that's on the JFK, has made runs each of the past 2 years. They've done great assembling talent on their roster, building schemes off of speed, which is always plentiful in the New Orleans area. So I really like what Coach Linares is doing over there at JFK, collecting talent, but also seeing it pay dividends on the field. And Holy Cross is one of these Catholic League contenders. I mean, the league is full of contenders. They would not surprise me if they continue to take another step forward this year. Obviously, each year, each run, they've had a different cast of contributors. And each year, Coach Wittigny has found a way to adjust and adapt and continue to fight these battles in this very difficult conference. And I think that the difficulty of the district is what really prepares them. So I'm excited to see what they look like this year. This is a very creative coaching staff, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. But the Catholic League is no joke, and you know that as well as anyone. So it's tough to be like, they're going to be a sleeper in the league. They could be one of the best teams. I just don't know if they're going to be the best team, but it usually makes for some good bouts in the playoffs because if you can make it out of the Catholic League in one piece, you're pretty battle tested when it starts to count.
They really surprised a lot of folks 2 years ago with Scott heading back over there to the alma mater, taking the reins of that program. They beat John Curtis for the first time in history, end up going into the playoffs as a 1 seed and all those things. And so there was an immediate jolt of energy into that program. And I think while last year was a little bit, or, this past fall was a little bit more of a grind, that there are definitely, a lot of positive foundations there. And that coach is building those guys to try and make what we saw 2 years ago be more of kind of the norm, and maybe, be to a point here sooner than later where they're building even past that and trying to compete for some state championships and whatnot. Speaking of that grind of Catholic League, the Friday night scrimmage that I went to that week was Jesuit making the trip out to Hanville. And so just continuing with this theme of all these great coaches that we really enjoy, is particularly, those first three I had a chance to catch. 3 scrimmages were all kind of New Orleans area schools. You get Coach Manali, Coach Boyne out there. I got some jambalaya for the road by the end of that. So shout out Coach Boyne and the Hanville Tigers. But that scrimmage, I think Hanville kind of came out of it and thought, we have some foundations here. We just got to get some things clicking. Receivers were kind of dropping some passes, and it became a little bit contagious. You could see the foundation there for, as they kind of settle in, and a lot of these guys settle into bigger roles than they've ever had before. They have a chance to be competitive once again this year. I think they surprised some people maybe last year in Coach Boyne's first year at the helm. And then for me, I was excited to see the Blue Jays and Zyron Forstall and Will Berry get after that Hanville offense. And so a lot to talk about for us with Z and where he's at right now as one of the nation's top 2027 prospects. But even on the flip side, as much as we expect Ryan Manali run the damn ball football over there at Carrollton and Banks, the quarterbacks and receivers connections were working. You saw Taylor Norton and Sully Sullivan and some of those guys at quarterback connecting on deep balls to Roman Leray and Jair Burks and company downfield. And so as much as Carr is kind of the team to beat in that Catholic League once again this year, I think Jesuit is right there in the mix of the top contenders, hoping to knock the Cougars off or vying for second place or however it ends up shaking out once we get into the actual battles on Friday nights.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that the Blue Jays are starting to click again. You obviously remember that Coach Manali had the Blue Jays in the state championship at Tulane his first year in Mid-City. Jesuit faces an uphill battle trying to keep kids, and they've been hit hard with transfers since Manali's gotten there, and they face their battles trying to recruit players. You know that. But I'm not surprised to hear that the passing offense is in good shape. I'm not surprised that with the talent that they have over there at Carrollton and Banks, that they are set to make a run behind Zyron, again, who has had a tremendous offseason and is, the cream of the crop when it comes to 2027s in Louisiana, especially outside of the quarterback position. So I'm super excited to see what Zyron looks like this year with all of this momentum and a little bit of pressure on his heels. And I would love to see what Jesuit looks like this year with that kind of talent. Hanville, talking to Coach Salt over the years and different people who have been around Hanville, it's one of the best jobs in the entire state. The talent in the river parishes and that region in particular is enormous. And the recruiting that goes on between Destrehan and East St. John and Hanville, it's messy. So Boyne coming over from Destrehan 2 years ago, obviously is super familiar with that parish. And I think is starting to see the fruits of his culture at Hanville. He's been the driving force of so many of these great Destrehan offenses under Coach Robichaux and then Coach Scott. So I think it's just a matter of time before it starts to fall into place at Hanville. We talked about it earlier with JFK, but there's a ton of speed in Hanville. There's also size, and when you're able to keep that roster intact, it wouldn't surprise me to see them start to make more noise more consistently, whether it's this year or going into next year. But those are two coaches that I fully have my most faith in. I love what they're doing at their respective jobs, and for Manali, I think this is a very big year for Coach Manali. This is a high pressure job at Jesuit. You got boosters like Jarrett Roser, demanding, Catholic League titles and playoff appearances. And I get it. And with this roster, I think he's more than able to live up to that. And of course, I think Coach Boyne has Hanville going in the right direction. So when you work out those kinks, I imagine by August, those drops will no longer be drops and those routes will be run correctly. Yeah. If I were to guess about that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to them in the thick of that district race where, Terrebonne beat Destrehan last year. Was the first time that Destrehan had dropped a district game since I think 2019, if my memory serves correctly. And so with Hanville kind of coming on, with Terrebonne coming on, with Coach Tyler Lewis and company down there, it makes things really interesting in that league, and looking forward to that. I do think it's important to point out from a Jesuit booster standpoint, I'm easy. And also my little $20 here and there, my last $20 from my broke ass wallet doesn't give me a whole lot of, speaking power or swaying power when I go back for the bazaar or anything like that. They're not too worried about what Jared Rose has to say.
They're wondering where the rest of it is, man. Come on. Zyron's gotta get new cleats for week 1, baby.
Yeah. Them and me both are wondering where the rest of my money could possibly be at this point. Speaking of that Terrebonne team, though, and just continuing with this trend of some great coaches to work with, which is going to remain a recurring theme through all 6 of these scrimmages. But McDonough 35, Frank Daggs and company making their way back down to Terrebonne to face those Tigers and Coach Lewis and company this past Monday night. And I think even with Alvin Celestine out and just kind of being precautionary with a hamstring, you strength on offensive line with Orion Mosley and Taden Bingham, being able to set the table for Quincy Adams and really anybody who you handed the ball to try and pick up a couple of yards. I told TY after, man, there were a couple points tonight where I feel like even me on my bum ankle and whatnot, I'm maybe going to be able to grind out a couple of yards at some point behind this offensive line, the way y'all are working it. And so to watch that group work and that group operate, the defense is kind of coming along. They've got some young talent coming up behind some of these guys who we've been talking about the last couple of years. I'm looking forward to where Terrebonne is in this 4th year under Coach Lewis. They're talking about, can we go make a run on the non-select side and maybe be talking about a dome trip in December? And when you look at that bracket and when you look at kind of the building process for Terrebonne these last couple of years, there's certainly reason to believe that they could be in the mix where we're talking about them. Okay, look, all of a sudden they're practicing on Thanksgiving. How do these matchups fall? Maybe they have a chance to kind of challenge for some things like that. On the 35 side, we've kind of talked about it before. It's just a tough job right now for Coach Daggs and company to keep that thing rolling and compete at the level that they want to be competing at. But they've got some guys. They've got some guys that are there that are locked in. Heise Jackson, the tall, long receiver, was one of the standouts from that Ron Eagles scrimmage down at Terrebonne. And so I'm looking forward to seeing how his summer goes as his recruiting process kind of picks up a little bit and how his fall goes. I will throw this out there kind of loosely, just, I don't know where you're at with your monitoring of it, but Ja'Kai Anderson wasn't at the scrimmage. I don't know, if we're going to expect to see him at 7-on-7, there's definitely, some whispers around New Orleans of, is he going to be at 35 in the fall? Frank said he's still enrolled at the school, and we'll look forward to seeing him. But before you start talking too much about Ja'Kai, that's a situation to monitor, I guess, as the school year ends.
Yeah, of course, I was about to talk up Coach Daggs and the program that obviously he runs, and the impact that Ja'Kai has had the past 2 or 3 years already at 35, and he is their star player. He is, I think he's going to go down in the record books for some of the stats that he's compiled over the years for 35. And I think we mentioned it a couple of episodes ago. I mean, this is a program that's battled enrollment issues for several years, and not that has stopped Coach Daggs from making runs in the playoffs each and every year. But it would be a shame to see such an important part of that program potentially leave. We know that Ja'Kai recently flipped his commitment from LSU to SMU. I did joke with Ja'Kai if Daggs' heart was broken after the news, and he said Daggs did not care, just wanted the best for me. Fully believe that. I think I would love for him to stay at 35. I think that he's put on some weight this offseason. He is such an integral part of what they do on offense, on special teams. I think he'll play defense again as a senior, already committed. The evaluation is done. So I think he'd be more willing to play some safety and corner for 35 as they make a playoff run. But that being said, on to Terrebonne. Love what I've seen from Alvin this offseason. He's a spark plug. He's got so much straight line speed, and I think that's been a tradition for this program. Who's obviously had Ja'Kai before, and Ja'Kai Douglas rather. I think all these Ja'Kais are now in my head. And behind the offensive lineman, Orion Mosley, who TY has been really excited about for years and has really come into his own as a standout interior offensive lineman. And when you pair speed of Alvin and the power of Orion, you see the foundation for what this offense could look like. And they have come very close. They've always had good talent up there in Terrebonne. They play in a very tough district, but certainly has the manpower to potentially make a run this year. And I think kind of like Holy Cross or Jesuit, the time is now. So let's see what they have up their sleeves. But that's news to me on the Ja'Kai stuff. Like I said, was having a really great offseason. Has put on weight, is trying to up his stock. You hope that he sticks in Louisiana, and you hope that he sticks at 35, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think it's important. I mainly wanted to kind of give you a heads up as we talk about the spring games dynamic that Ja'Kai wasn't in the mix that night, that Monday night. It may just be that night, as much as there can be buzz and whispers and whatnot around the city or around the state of high school football players and where they may or may not be at school or heading to school. At the end of the day, how many times do we hear buzz and then nothing happens of that? And so let's not jump the gun on much of that, and just looking forward to to what's ahead regardless, I guess. And on the Terrebonne side as well, Orion Mosley, for fans that haven't watched him much or don't know the name as well, keep an eye on that guy. He's someone that LSU has paid some attention to, maybe not as much as some folks down the bayou would like for them to have paid at this point, and making some sort of a move. He's someone that, the Texas and Houstons and Penn States and Arkansas of the world are kind of more in play with him right now, but is someone that we see guys every year that get kind of overlooked somewhat by LSU, or don't end up in LSU's class for one reason or another, or just, someone elsewhere that's just a little bit higher on the board, and they end up going elsewhere and making LSU pay at some point during the course of their college careers. And so Orion kind of has that sort of mold to him a little bit, if that's the way it all works out. I'm interested to see if we see him come through Baton Rouge for camp at all this summer. I know he's going to be active with some of those other destinations I mentioned, but he's someone that is absolutely one of the top offensive linemen in this class around the state to keep an eye on for fans that just want to know top Louisiana guys, which I imagine folks watching Louisiana versus all y'all and us 30 minutes into a spring football wrap up probably fit that mold. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah. Has camped at LSU in the past. I think someone that potentially has center
Yeah.
projections
Oh
for
yeah, for
for
sure.
LSU. But a lot of other guys on LSU's board. We'll see. I right now I would say very unlikely, but we'll see. This offensive line situation is very unique. They're recruiting Lamar Brown to play on the defensive line. They're in a great spot with Darius Gray, but if things and they're also pushing for a couple of flips out of the SIP. But if things don't go right, it's easy to turn back to the Bayou and go scoop up Orion Mosley.
You hope. I mean, when you're talking about the in-state guys, sometimes LSU kind of slow plays some things. They don't want to jump the gun too much. They kind of, kick the tires on some options elsewhere around the country. And then depending on when they come in later and what that foundation looks like and just, what the kid and the family are looking for, sometimes they come in a little bit too late and end up having allowed too big of a chip on his shoulder to build over time. But we'll see how it all shakes out for obviously the LSU recruiting class as well as for Orion and where his destination ends up being. My destination last Tuesday was to head right over to Iberville Parish and see Karen Crow at Plaquemine. I think two teams that I was really looking forward to seeing as I built out my initial spring schedule. And so I was happy that their spring game kind of spilled over into that subsequent week. To make it an easy time to go catch them without having to worry about missing anything big elsewhere. And Karen Crow, Chance Babineau has kind of had his resurgence on the recruiting trail. It's good to see him working primarily at safety and receiver and being a mobile chess piece now that Carson Gursey, the 2028 quarterback, steps into the more full-time role as that being his offense to lead, other than some wildcat situations with Chance. But that's a big team in the trenches. They've got a talented young quarterback. They've got a veteran playmaker we've loved since he was a freshman a few years back in Chance Babineau. And, Carson's not the only 2028 guy that folks should be excited about. There's a list of them I've had, throughout this year from Coach Peters out there at Karen Crow. And so keep an eye on the building process, the rebuilding process for the Golden Bears out there. Plaquemine is a team that made its first semifinal run since 2014 this past fall, and they've got some key pieces to replace on offense with Nico Victorian and Tyrese Mosby. The defense was out there just, full-blown hunting mode and explosive hit after explosive hit. Looks like it's going to be a unit that they can really kind of base their identity around and hang their hat on heading into the season, while some new faces start in the backfield and on the offensive line for Coach Williams and company kind of get their bearings about them and find their rhythm. But there's weapons all over the place. We'll see how quarterback Brennan Miles kind of comes into his own this fall, but Spencer Collins at running back looked really good with some explosive runs, big breakaway runs for scores. John Walker V, a guy that had a nice season, all-state caliber type season at receiver as a sophomore this past fall. Coach Williams said he's seeing him kind of take on some of the next steps as a leader and as a playmaker. And so the cupboard is certainly not empty on the offensive side of the ball for Coach Williams and company. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Green Devils possibly right back in the thick of the top contenders of Division II non-select right away this fall.
Yeah. Chance Babineau is someone that has been on our radar for several years, and I'm giddy about the opportunity for him to kind of, get his feet wet playing other positions. He's kind of been a team first player playing quarterback for Karen Crow, and that speaks volumes about the kind of kid and character he is, and the importance of high school football first for someone like him. Also a gifted baseball player, multi-sport athlete, but we saw a little bit this offseason with the 7-on-7 of him, playing some skill positions, and that's what a lot of schools would like to see. So this is going to be a chance for Chance to really up his stock as a senior, the most important time for his recruiting process. So this is going to be a big opportunity. We've seen what he's done leading the offense, but it's kind of left you wanting more. Let's see how he can work in space, how he can attack the balls in midair. Let's see how he can defend in coverage. Let's see what position is up for Chance if schools are going to take a chance on him at a skill position outside of quarterback. As far as Plaquemines, I'm really excited to see. Obviously, they have not had the talent that we've been used to over the past couple of years since our boy Todd Harris was out there. But always a program that's a tough place to play. Has historically put out some of the best players in the state. I have not been super privy to a lot of the talent that has come out in recent years. I know they did ink a Power Four kid, maybe from to South Carolina a couple of years ago. It's kind of off the top of my head. He signed somewhere in the Power Four, but my brain is too fuzzy at this point. But definitely, I'm very excited about Karen Crow again this year. Like you said, they always have young talent. They have young coaches now. I think that they're a team that, are you going to make your run with your senior now playing this, jackknife role, or does that really set up this program to make a run for after? But we'll see.
Look, you talk about Coach Peters and the young coaches. Tony Corville was very young at heart, is very young at heart still. Love seeing him bouncing around, going to support his son, Michael, in his coaching roles, who he now obviously, heads back closer to home and takes over that Turlings Catholic program. I can't think of who you mean on the Plaquemine side, but that is a program that, look, while they may not have had the LSU guy in recent years, they have been a steady stream of guys off to the college level. This year, Roderick Bingham, the safety who's committed to the Raging Cajuns, is kind of the headliner thus far of this 26 class. I think John Walker, that I mentioned, that receiver in the 27 class, is someone that we're going to be talking about, heading off to go play some D1 ball. Really athletic kid that, I think pushed for close to 1,000 yards receiving, and as a sophomore, and is looking to build off of that. So again, looking forward to that Plaquemine team for sure. And wrapping up the spring scrimmage schedule for me, no better place than beautiful downtown Vacherie, where St. James hosted Frederick A. Douglass, Coach McLeod and company, with the Bobcats heading on down there to face Coach Davis and the Wildcats. And look, we're going to probably end up talking more about St. James, and rightfully so. It's a team that's been in the Dome back-to-back years and looks poised to make another deep playoff run. But Douglas had some guys. They took the field. They had some good size to them. They had guys that were flying around making plays, just, throwing one name out there from the senior class, Kylie Collier, an edge rusher that, when St. James's offense was able to be slowed or thrown off its rhythm at all in spots, Kylie, his pressure off the edge was kind of a big component there. And talking to Coach McLeod after, they've got a couple of younger guys to keep an eye on for these classes to come. And so we may be talking a little bit more about the Frederick Douglass program, and some names coming out and going to be potential college guys in these coming years. St. James, though, always near and dear to our hearts. They've got their 2028 quarterback, Jawan Jackson, back from his freshman season, where he looked great in being thrown into the fire as a freshman to be able to lead a team with title aspirations and bring them into the Superdome, with obviously, a great team and staff around him. But he held his own, and he made some big plays in the Dome. And now he's back with that year of experience under his belt. Ja'Kias Villanueva was making plays all over the field. They've got weapons galore, and Coach Davis was really pleased with what he saw from a new look offensive line in the spring game. And so if that O-line can continue to come along and hold its own this fall, you're looking at a St. James team that in Division III non-select should be, again, as strong of a case of a championship contender as anybody.
Yeah, St. James is littered with speed all over the field on both sides of the ball. We saw that in the Dome last year. Not surprised that a Levante Davis team is also stacked on the defensive side of the ball and has playmakers that are probably going to see the snaps on offense, receiver, running back, and also a DB. But yeah, the big storyline here is the quarterback. In the Dome last year, I can't even recall how many conversations in New Orleans and then the weeks after. How good is the St. James quarterback going to be? Is he the next Lowell Narcisse? Well, listen, let's keep Thibodeau's head coach off the comparison sheet for just a second. I think we were all impressed with the performance of this quarterback in that setting as a youngster, but now that some time has gone by, there is plenty of room for this quarterback to improve. And if he's able to step up and make those get more comfortable, be more accurate, be more of a force from the quarterback position as much as opposed to a distributor to be a playmaker from that position. I think that will be the edge that can put these Vatchery Wildcats in a real title contending conversation. I expect them to be knocking on the door, if not back in the dome, given what's coming back. But the difference between, I think, coming over that hurdle and winning will be the play of this quarterback. Because like we said, Coach Davis is going to have a sick defense. They're going to have a very fast, hard to deal with offense that's going to put up a lot of points on the scoreboard. But the difference is whether that quarterback can make plays in the dome when the defense outside of them is ready for him. And that was something I think we saw in a little bit last year, but would love to see more as he takes a step into this season.
Yeah, I think it's important for folks to remember it's a process, man. And Juwan went in there and played admirably as a young guy at 14 years old. People forget just because he's whatever he is, 6'2", and I mean such a big kid already. That's a young guy that still has his best years, not only of football in general and everything ahead of him, but he's got a lot of processing and growth in his game throughout his high school career, as do any of these guys that we're talking about. But very exciting early flashes from him. Obviously, I thought he had a heck of a freshman year. We mentioned some of the talent and weapons all over the field. Kanai King Young in that backfield was strong in the scrimmage to wrap up the spring. A guy that has gained some D1 attention from around the country in his own right. Defense was flying around. Nolan Zenon, who had that, whatever it was, 23, I think, tackles in the state championship game. He was flying around the spring scrimmage field. And at one point, when a Frederick A. Douglass player was making his way out of bounds, Nolan is kind of running over our direction and pleading with the referees, like, please let me hit somebody. I'm trying to hit everything that moves. Let me go, like, fly around and play the physical brand of football that I want to. A guy that Grambling State just extended his first offer recently, but he and DeMonte, I think it's Limar. I've had some people say Lumar, some people say Limar. Another guy that flew around the field, had at least half a dozen tackles. The secondary played well. I think Caden Brown ended up with an interception. Kendrick Joseph had one that he wanted to be an interception, and it'll be an interception next time, I think. He just started the end zone started looming too big in his eyes when he jumped the hell out of that pass, and so he'll learn from that as a young, versatile defensive back. But that's a team that somehow these years continues to feel young every year because they continue to have such great talent finding their way to that varsity roster early on. And this is a team that once again has a lot of young guys that they'll look to, but has a lot of young guys that already have experience and are going to be really exciting to watch this fall. I don't know if you have any more to add on any of the scrimmages, or you want to kind of open it up a little bit more to just general your thoughts coming out of spring, teams that you hope to hear or see more of over the coming months, or just teams that you're a little bit intrigued about that maybe we haven't had a chance to talk about as much. But Samuel, I'll leave the floor to you as we kind of pivot away from the scrimmages.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't have my most active spring, especially I was not in the boot in particular. I was really impressed with Lamar Brown this spring, not only what he did on the football field, but as a track state champion throwing discus only adds to his athletic profile. And trying to contextualize what Lamar Brown has done this spring, in addition to a state championship discus toss, has been ranked as the number one interior offensive lineman in the country and is now currently tabbed as either the number one athlete in the country or the number one defensive lineman in the country. Jared, I cannot for the life of me recall anyone who has been ranked at number one at 3 different positions in 5 months. I think it's a credit to someone who I've had talks with, SEC coordinators on both sides of the ball, that would say we would take him at offensive line, defensive line. It does not matter. He is that good at both. I think that is rare. I can't remember anyone that Dar Rosenthal would be the closest, and deep down, everybody knew that he was a tackle. So I think that we should not ignore Lamar's spring. That was kind of my biggest thing. Obviously I didn't get to get out there. If I did, I would have plenty more on the Carr and Destrehan kids. We talked a lot about Jabari Mack and the spring that he's had. I had a conversation with a staffer in the SEC that said, is he a 5-star now? And I think it's a fair question. I think he certainly cemented his spot as a top 50 or 60 player in the country. Is he a 5-star? Will be, I think, really hinge on his senior season at Destrehan. We did touch on that a little bit earlier. How productive can he be? But in terms of speed, the production since he's put on 15 or 20 pounds, the testing has been extraordinary. Extreme polish and route running with his game, explosiveness, twitch. My only holdback with Jabari is whether he's a top 50 player in the country or a top 32. Is he has taken such a drastic leap forward despite maybe not the production that you want at the high school level. Is I don't know how much better he can possibly get, because the production is going to come if and when he gets to LSU. I just don't know how much more his game can get better or improve, especially since he's putting up these track times and has been so dynamic with his extra weight. But Jabari, Lamar, incredible off seasons. Talking about the special classes in Louisiana for 2026 and 2027. I can't remember a back-to-back cycle that has been this loaded and intriguing as 26 and 27.
Yeah. 26 has been great at the top for sure. 27 continues. It has felt like we've been ramping up from, if not 25, maybe even 24 to 26 and 27 and these great talented classes. And the early makings of some of this 2028 class, I'm pretty intrigued by, to watch some of the first guys kind of popping up. Obviously, to kind of accurately judge the class, we need to give it some more time as more guys continue to earn their opportunities to break into those varsity roles, or more guys hit the camp circuit, or just more guys develop or don't ultimately. And so watch the way that the class comes together as a whole. But I definitely am intrigued by some guys early on in that 2028 class, and we'll be talking about them more in the future for sure. On Lamar, dude, number one in 3 different positions. I would love to be number one in any one position at anything. And if I'm
How
Lamar,
do I get to be number one anything? Number one person, number one nuisance, number one problem. Just give me the top ranking on anything.
Lamar can catch the football enough, and we've joked about in the past, how much he enjoyed some 7-on-7 opportunities back when he was a young player. If I'm Lamar, F it. Start telling everyone of us, hey, I'm a tight end now. I'm going to go play tight end to the next level, and see if you can, in the next month and a half, get a ranking as the top tight end in the country, and just continue to add to that resume before his July 10th commitment announcement.
Show it to me in my NIL papers, baby.
I think that kind of wraps it up. I don't know that I mentioned to you in terms of topics to get to. Biggest surprises from the spring would probably be some combination of Hayward moving his commitment date up and popping to Texas before the summer hits, or Ja'Kai flipping to SMU. I think any of those guys, you want to go all the way back to May 31st with Blaine Bradford and his commitment to Ohio State, and this early in the process. A lot of it would probably be just the guys that didn't end up committing to LSU, and as much as the destination, the timelines being as big of a surprise as maybe anything for some of these guys. I think we kind of know some of these biggest stock risers because we keep talking about them. Isaiah Washington, Easton Royal, that list kind of goes on. And, shout out to another team that we didn't get a chance to mention, but I was asked recently, who's a team that maybe we aren't talking as much about, but has a chance to be really good this fall, which is always one of my favorite parts of the spring, of just kind of seeing the foundations of a team ready to take a step. And I think a team at West St. John that had some down years took a step back forward this past fall, had a winning record for the first time in several years. Coach Thomas and company, man, they've got 45, 50 guys on that roster now as a 1A school, and they've got some good young talent. And so for fans that want to kind of buy early on a program that I think is kind of back on the rise, I would say West St. John, as a small school out there in the River Parishes, is one that is under the radar right now, but has a chance to go compete for potentially a district title and potentially trying to, punch its way back in the direction of the Dome here this fall. So just shout out to those Rams down there, and a little bit further down the road from me toward New Orleans from beautiful downtown Vatry, beautiful downtown Edgar,
Hey, it's not Vatry, but it is Ed Gerd. I think back in the day, I broke when Coach Thomas had returned or become the head coach at HL Bourgeois. I think I confirmed that at a latter part of the night back in our NOLA.com days. But yeah, West St. John is, I mean, it's the house that Robert Valdez built. Let's call it that. But they've turned out a ton of talent and had a couple of fantastic Superdome runs over the past 10 plus years. It's a program that is just so built off the culture of everything is around the Rams out there in Edgard and Coach Thomas, a couple of his assistants, Coach Bartholomew, Coach Joseph. It's a great program, a lot of great people in that community. Feels like even when they're down, it's only a matter of time before you find the right ingredients and they're right back in the thick of things.
Shout out to Chance Bovey in that senior class. He's getting some D1 looks. Another place with a lot of 2028 talent and a lot of 2028 talent that already had prominent roles as freshmen this fall. But keep an eye on the Rams. Keep an eye on all these teams. Keep an eye on us as this summer continues to develop. And we're talking about how this LSU class develops over the next month. What's going on with Lamar Brown, again, over the final month and a half home stretch before his commitment announcement date on July 10th. And
going to the U this weekend, baby.
All of the recruiting updates, just like that one. Lamar heading down to Miami for his next visit. All the recruiting updates from us throughout the summer. He's Sam Spiegelman. I'm Jarrett Roser. This is Louisiana versus all y'all's Recruit That Boot. Until next time, y'all be well. Sam, go grab something to eat because we have another meeting in about 3 hours.